G'day guys. This little video is going to be on stomach function and digestive issues and low stomach acid, those sort of issues that plague modern societies today. And look at what's out there, what people are discussing, and solutions to these problems. Let me just share this. This is the sort of typical stuff you'll find. For instance, how do we increase stomach acid at home? Oh, wonderful. So typical sort of MD sort of approach for low stomach acid. They cover the key points, upset stomach, nausea, acid reflux. Because acid reflux is not because of too much acid in the stomach, it's actually because of too little. And what it means is you end up getting from the pancreas, you're getting it's trying to help to add this acidity, but it's not enough to actually close the sphincters. And when you don't close the sphincter, what you do is you get this gassing into the esophagus, and that's what acid reflux is. So it's basically a dysfunctional stomach that's not basically producing enough stomach acid, like the gastric juices that are required to break down foods. Our stomachs are designed to do that. They've got a pH of about 1.5, one of the lowest in any species other than scavengers. So beyond the odd scavenger out there. And the reason is this is an adaptation that we've acquired in the past when we hunted mega beast, very large animals, and through those millions of years of evolution of hominins on this planet, we consumed them over a number of days. And so we've acquired an adaptation to maintain a very low stomach pH in order to basically not only digest, but also to deal with all manner of pathogens that would increase in those type of foods. So that's animal foods, that's a critical part. So heartburn, obviously, that's part of that sort of situation. If you're not absorbing, if you don't have enough acidity, stomach acid levels, that means low pH. Malnutrition, skin issues, osteoporosis, leaky gut syndrome, diabetes, cancer, asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, and one of our favorite ones for the vagunarized, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Eating a lot of those alkaline-rich foods that they tend to do, which basically causes a lot of these issues. What causes low stomach acid? Eating too quickly. I doubt it. I still eat just as fast as I used to eat in the past. The difference is I eat animal products now and not plants. And my digestion is way better. So I would say has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's an N of one, but talking to other carnivores and all that, they seem to have not changed their eating habits or their style of eating or anything like that. There's been no issue. High sugar intake, don't think so. I think it's a problem in the general way that a lot of sad dieters eat, but that's not the key driver in terms, our ancestors had seasonal sugar, had seasonal these things. They didn't succumb to acid reflux. This is the lack of something rather than the actual, some of these other things that they talk about. A zinc deficiency. I would say a meat deficiency, not a zinc deficiency. That would be more accurate. This is just associational, Zinc. Most of these things are associational. They really come down to a deficiency in animal foods. In the 1950s, 1960s, and earlier, our diet was 2/3 animal foods, 1/3 plants. We've flipped that. Now it's 2/3 plant foods, 1/3 animal foods, and declining rapidly with all the newfangled fake animal foods out there that are starting to permeate. And a lot of people nowadays, even people that are not vegan or vegetarian, are being influenced or guilted into basically consider these foods as options. These issues are going to become worse because you need animal foods for good stomach acid. Age, well, most older people nowadays are living in nursing homes, disconnected from family members and all that, consuming heaps of kibble. So that doesn't surprise me. Antacid medication and prescription drugs. Surprise, surprise. Food sensitivities or allergies. That's a downstream effect rather than a direct causal. Infection, it depends. What are we talking about? H. pylori, Candida, and a few other nasties that are basically have a tendency of inhibiting acid production in the stomach? Yes, but what caused that in the first place is the issue. Chronic illness, indirect. It's more of a downstream causal effect. Symptoms from low stomach acid, cramping. Many people in their days of eating a lot of plants experienced all these wonderful sort of effects: cramping, heartburn, nausea, acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea, infection. Some of them. Undigested food in stools. We've heard plenty of horror stories of the plant-based community in that regard. Bad breath, yes, and bad farts as well. Weak hair and nails, obviously lack of protein. Yes, as I said, a meat deficiency. Dry skin, hair loss, all symptoms of a meat deficiency. Yes. Low consumption of animal products. Yes. That a steak diet can definitely correct. Chew your food. If your acidity is low at 1.5 pH, I can tell you it will dissolve bone. I don't think chewing is going to fix that problem. It's just not low enough is the problem. When your stomach has a low pH of 1.5, it can actually dissolve a bone. And basically what the stomach will do at that level will basically denature all the proteins down to basic amino acids. Yes, denature. Yes, that horrifying word, but that's what the stomach does. It's only crackpots that think there's a problem with denaturing. We take amino acids in once we've denatured those proteins, and then with enzymes, we recombine them and fold them appropriately. So it's usually derangements and dysregulation that cause the problems, not natural physiological processes. It's reductionism at its best. Anyway, let's move on before I rant about those sort of issues. Limit processed foods. Well, that's a good idea in general. High kibble food does create a lot of these problems. Eat fermented vegetables. If you've got a lot of issues, that's the last thing you probably want. You need to eat steak and remove the veggies and let the body heal itself. I would rather consume kefir than fermented vegetables. Drink apple cider vinegar. Eric Berg's favorite beverage, yes. Just avoid brushing your teeth later on because you may destroy your enamel or damage it at least at a minimum. So no, it's probably not the best solution. The pH of apple cider vinegar isn't as low as we require. We require the body to adjust to those lower, and it can possibly, if consumed in large amounts, probably can dilute what would naturally be developed by the body. So give that a miss unless your pH is really poor, and it may help slightly, but I would say HCl tablets would do a much better job than that apple cider vinegar in this regard, without the risks of damaging your enamel as well, your tooth enamel. Eat ginger. I'm not even going to waste my time arguing against that one. What a waste of, yeah. Anyway, it's as if all these things will fix. I mean, all these remedies that these sites actually put up, people try them all the time. Doesn't fix the problem, I can tell you. You know, it's just the same motherhood statements. 11 best ways to improve your digestion naturally. Eat real food. Where's the steak? Huh? I don't see a steak there. I see a lot of sugary stuff, a couple of greens, some lemons. Well, you know, I do have a sort of a liking for lemons, even though not probably a species appropriate, but, you know, the citric acid helps with the oxalates, has helped in the past, but I do like the taste as well, especially on pork and fish. So anyway, you can take my carnivore card away from me later on. And if we go through here, get plenty of fiber. Oh, God. The last thing I need to do is basically put more alkaline crap into my gut. Let's move on. Add healthy fats. Flaxseed, chia. Are you kidding me? Most people can't even convert that crap into DHA or EPA. Just eat fish and other animal products, eggs included. Stay hydrated. I know the best way to hydrate my body, and it's the fat of ruminant animals. Yes, great stuff. Great metabolic water, low in deuterium as well. Manage your stress. I know one food that will actually increase GABA and reduce these sort of anxiety issues that most plant-based people suffer. It's called meat. Who would have thought? Eat mindfully. Okay, I'll have an intellectual discussion with myself each time with my food. I'll sit there, sort of eat slowly. Focus on the food. Yes. Get into that Zen state of me and the food. Probably not. Do people really do this sort of nonsense? Oh, God, it's just chew your food. Oh, that again. God, I've got enough stomach acid. I can deal with it. Get moving. Probably the only intelligent thing. Yes, it does improve peristalsis. It does improve gut motility. It's probably the only thing that I'd actually agree with. Slow down and listen to your body. Another one of those, yes, what can one say? Statements that will really fix things. Ditch bad habits, smoking, alcohol, and late night eating. Yeah, it's not too bad, that sort of stuff. There's probably good good things in that regard. Eating outside your circadian rhythms is good thing. Alcohol and smoking, definitely not good for your health. But I don't think they're going to really improve your digestive system. There are plenty of people that smoke and drink and don't have digestive problems. So I don't think that's causing the problem. That may exacerbate problems, but it's not causing it. There's a bit of a difference in that. Unless you're excessively, an alcoholic and eating crap, yes. Incorporate gut supporting nutrients. If I've got SIBO, it's the last thing I want to be putting in my system. Glutamine and zinc, well, that's in animal foods. I don't even, just eat a steak. The bottom line is you've got no idea. This is the sort of typical nonsense which we get on most websites. It's this sort of typical stuff, helps absolutely nobody. It's all these sort of airy-fairy, plant-based, sort of nonsensical sort of solutions, if you could call them that. I just call them a waste of space, basically. Helps no one and pretty much just confuses everyone, makes it difficult to understand what the hell is going on, really. At the end of the day, to improve, as I've always said, it all starts in the stomach. Well, it all starts in the mouth, but anyway, but the stomach is a critical part of that. It's basically that part of the body that keeps what's coming in, what's going into the basically the gut system and into your body. It really sort of keeps certain things that shouldn't be there out, and it also improves the digestion of these nutrients. So if you've got a dysfunctional stomach, you've got problems in digesting, malabsorption issues, malnutrition issues, and on from there. And it just then goes downstream. It causes a whole lot of other issues in that regard. Plus, you're not getting sufficient certain nutrients and all that. Vagus nerve up to the brain, more issues in that regard. Yes. So generally speaking, as we get older, because of our current modern lifestyles and eating patterns, we're just making things worse, exacerbating these problems, unfortunately, and they're not getting any better. And as we shift more and more away from animal foods, I see a bigger escalation in these sort of areas. Constantly hearing people around you, like myself as well, constantly hearing people about gut issues, diverticulitis, and all sorts of issues that are just exacerbated by the excessive amount of plants that people are shoving down their throats, which is one of the biggest problems. As I've said always, sun, salt, and meat should be your focus. That is our ancestral way. When you stick to that ancestral way, you get the results you're looking for. Now, this is a study that I'm going to show that's out of the Ukraine. So it's another one of those studies that has been around for now, what is it, about 11 years? But it hasn't seen the light outside the Ukraine. They recently did a post on PubMed about it, but that's about it. I had to find it on a Ukrainian website and download it. It's in Ukrainian and translate it. And the problem is some of the translation was a bit horrific, unfortunately. So I'm going to read from the PubMed part, the abstraction, and then I'll go to the study to get a few finer points here and there. And that's how I'm going to do it, because that's the only way of actually dealing with it. Unfortunately, outside, as I've said, a lot of these basic research studies and looking into certain nutrients, how they can improve certain areas and how they affect certain areas, tend to happen either in other countries, which are not basically running studies for the food industry or the pharmaceutical sector, because that's where the money is, and that's where, institutions in Western Europe, Australasia, and North America tend to get most of their dosh, unfortunately, nowadays, the way they operate. And so they basically serve their masters who are paying them. But in some of these other countries, there are, most of their money is coming from the state, and the state wants solutions because they don't want to fork out shitloads of money to foreign pharmaceutical companies. It affects their balance of payments. It affects their budgets. So they've got an incentive to find out alternative solutions that actually work and don't cost them an arm and a leg. So that's why I do seek beyond the typical Western academia, which thinks it's smarter, but it's not. Repeating and regurgitating the same junk that they've done for a number of years now doesn't really solve anybody. And to basically just come up with cop-out remarks that, it may be this or maybe that, or associational garbage, and which is cheap. They can generate heaps of these cheap studies with food frequency questionnaires, which basically tell us very little, can't actually explain mechanisms and stuff like that. So you really have to do mechanistic studies. You really have to basically have a control group, have a non-control group, give them a certain substance, see what happens, these sort of things. This is basic research. This is what we did in the past, with vitamins and minerals and stuff like that, to see what actually corrected certain things like pellagra or whatever, certain types of disease of rickets and things like that. So we don't do that sort of stuff anymore. It's not fashionable. Fashionable stuff is to do these, food frequency questionnaires and create associational and adjusted data, which is fabricated data, and do all this sort of stuff because it's sexy. It gets plenty of money. It's cheap to do. It gets plenty of money for the academics and the universities, and it lifts their ratings. So their academic rating is actually high because they've pumped out more studies for the year. The question is, what's the quality? If you go back in the past 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, most academics back then were doing real research in the labs. They may have published, when they had something, 1, 2, maybe 3 studies in their lifetime. We're talking about even people that collaborated with Einstein and all that. Nobel Prize winners had probably, published 2 or 3 studies in their whole life. That's it. But they were high quality. They were something you could bank on. They were of quality research. They stayed in there until they had something to tell the world. These people have nothing to tell the world. They are corrupt. They're in it for the tenure, for the money, the prestige, and they like to get on the media and basically project, push their ego to the top, how great they are. But they basically just deliver garbage, which is pretty much what the whole sort of sector of research in these areas in most Western countries is nowadays. It's low quality garbage, guys. It's really poor. It's horrifying, but that's the reality. That's why we're in the health mess we are, because pretty much when you're peddling this sort of nonsense, you can peddle all sorts of nonsensical food item, or what I call Frankenstein concoctions masquerading as food. Anyway, let's take a look at this study. Okay, so paths of taurine influence on gastric secretion. Yes, our dear friend taurine, which we find in animal foods. In chronic experiments with dogs with gastric fistulas, so basically they've got ulcers, probably being fed inappropriate things. The influence of amino acid taurine on the gastric secretion was investigated. We showed that taurine did not cause gastric secretion out of digestion. So got it? So outside digestion, so if you actually consume taurine, it'll work for digestion, but outside the digestive period has no effect. And that's the way it's supposed to work. So when you eat a steak, which has got a whole lot of taurine in, it will improve gastric secretion. And that's what you want. This is why animal foods send signal to the body. We need low pH. Now, obviously, if you've been eating species inappropriate foods and you've stuffed up your stomach and you can't get that low pH, or you've taken proton pump inhibitors and stuff like that, and you've really deranged the whole system, then obviously things aren't going to work as they should, you know. But basically, this is what it's supposed to do. But increased gastric secretion stimulated by histamine. So as you can see, histamine is involved. I've talked about histamine in the past. Now, histamine is not a bad thing. Depends where it's being expressed and by how much. It's like uric acid. Uric acid cycle isn't a bad thing. It basically is a potent antioxidant. But with fructose in the system, let's say meat and honey, it could derange the uric acid cycle. That's the problem, you know, by glycating the proteins in the kidneys and elsewhere and really deranging a lot of these processes the way they work if you continue doing it for long enough. And that's the thing we need to understand. There's a difference between certain types of physiological, things the way they operate, and outside those when we derange them or dysregulate them. That's a different thing. You can't accuse. That's what reductionists do. Reductionist people find all sorts of funny associations with all sorts of things. This is mechanism where they show that if you put this in or take it out, things change, and they measure it. That's good research science, not the sort of crackpot associational garbage that we usually get thrown in our face by vagunarized crackpots. But increased, and that's basically what it does is, but increased gastric secretion stimulated by histamine. So histamine plays a positive role in this regard. And histamine plays actually a positive role in the brain, another tissue. So it's not a negative thing. It's only when it's deranged and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. If you, even taurine, I've explained before, actually degrades histamine, and a lot of saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. You find these in animal foods tend to also degrade histamine. So histamine isn't a bad thing unless you've got leaky gut and you've got all these other derangements and stuff like that. That's when it becomes a problem. So fix those problems first of all, and then you don't have a problem. Then you can consume and enjoy, cheeses that are aged like I do, meats that are aged like I do, a lot of cured meats and all that, which are some of my favorite things that I consume. And you won't have any problems because basically you've got a good low pH to fix that issue. And you've also got good nutrients that basically degrade those histamines once they've done their job in their stomach. Okay. Increase the content of gastric acid, pepsin, and gastric secretes. So as you can see, you're getting good levels of gastric acid being as a consequence, pepsin, and the general gas. When administered either 15 minutes or 2 hours prior to histamine injection, taurine affected the basically your sodium, your basically what we're talking about here is salt, really. So that's what we're really talking about. So keep that in mind. When I know they usually comment in this way, but the way I basically see it is it's salt. Okay. So yes, it's sodium ions, but the way I view it is salt, meat, and sun, the sort of, or SSM to be more precise, sun, salt, and meat. But anyway, so sodium and potassium concentrations in gastric juices. The greatest change in basic indices of gastric secretion were observed 14 hours after administration of taurine. In these experiments, the total protein components of aniline system in gastric secretion was increased also. Blockade the cholioreceptor by atropine. These are sort of other stuff that they've actually put in, decrease the effects of taurine on gastric secretion simulated by histamine. So they've basically, been able to use these blockers to do the opposite and all that. So blockade of adenoreceptor and phentolamine did not prevent the taurine-induced effects on histamine-stimulated gastric secretion. Why would it? It is established under conditions the blockade of beta adenoreceptor by abistane. Taurine does not manifest entirely its potential influence on the gastric secretion simulating by histamine. The data obtained indicate that taurine affects gastric secretion simulated by histamine, and the realization of this effect occurs through M- and N choline and B adenoreceptors. Now, let me go to the actual study. So that's the method that they used. Experiments were performed. Purebred dogs with gastric fistulas in chronic condition. Experiments after 18 hours of food deprivation during 1.5 years of observation. 15 minutes were collected samples of gastric, taking into account volume. Each sample of gastric juice was determined by the concentration of free hydrochloric acid in titrans units and pepsin in Hunt's method. So these are just methods that are out there, well established, and total protein. So, administration of taurine to dogs as intragastric and per os did not stimulate secretion of gastric glands outside the period digestion, but altered mucus secretion. So, and that's the key thing. We're not getting any secretion outside the actual period when digesting. Okay. So obviously these animals are ulcerated, but at least outside that, we're not getting that effect, which is the key thing. However, such changes or secretion mucus and pH gastric content did not change the properties of secretion digestion period, which also is the proper physiological response. I mean, if you've still got stuff that you're actually digesting, why would it? In such sample amounts of mucus secretion was less than control values. The results of our studies supplement the data at other authors on the effects of taurine on the formation of mucus in the stomach. Yes, when the stomach is damaged. So only when the stomach is damaged. So it actually has like a protective, it creates like a protective layer as well. So people who may have, ulcerations because of pathogens that are basically like H. pylori that tend to burrow and create these ulcerations. Well, here you've basically got this mucosal sort of protective layer that's actually being generated. So when the stomach is damaged. So basically, again, here's the reason why people find relief from meat. I'll just stop this and I'll go back to it. See, so people get relief from meat. I don't want to baffle you with too many scientific terms and going through all this sort of stuff, but I will come back to this in a sec. But it's the key thing is just to pick up on these things. One, it only actually initiates that secretion when, so if you've got a steak, you're eating a steak, which has got taurine in it, or you're eating fish, which has got taurine in it, or you're eating octopus, which has got taurine in it, or you're eating a piece of chicken, which has got taurine in it. Any food that's got taurine, a good quantity of it, it will have this effect. It will increase these gastric, the pepsin, the gastric fluids, juices to a level to break down that food. Very important. Plus, if the stomach is damaged, it's quite clear. What they noticed was it will generate also a mucus type layer membrane to protect. And that's what people notice when they go on a carnivore diet, even when they've had stomach issues and stuff like that, they start getting relief. It's not accidental, because the problem is most plants and all other foods, and processed foods in particular, are very poor in sulfur amino acids like methionine, like taurine and stuff like that. And this is one of the reasons why they're not very good for the human body and they're not protective. Where taurine, on the other hand, will actually protect even a damaged stomach, plus they'll help in actually breaking down the food and increasing the acidity levels. And that's important in all these juices because we want to eliminate also the pathogens in there, both carried in with the food, coming through the oral area, plus any H. pylori and candida and all these other nasties that are in there that are basically deliberately inhibiting the proton pumps, deliberately trying to undermine and proper digestion and causing a lot of burrowing in like H. pylori does and causing a lot of these ulcer type formations in the stomach. So let me just find the other part. Okay, let's just bring that on. So this part here is also the concentration of sodium under the effects of taurine in the first series of this part experiment was greater than the control, and the concentration of potassium decreased only during the first hour of observation. In the second series, a part of a study, the level of gastric secretion under the influence of taurine probably exceeded the control value in the first hour of the experiment, after which sharply decreased and was lower than the control. See there? That's another important thing. So it increased the actual, while you were digesting the food in the stomach, it increased and then sharply decreased it. So it actually has the ability to take out any excess. Once it's done the job, it sharply decreases it, then opens up the bottom valve, and allows that food content to go into the small intestine. That's what you want. That's what a proper regulated stomach should be. Shouldn't actually be running high acidity continually or low acidity. It should basically increase the acidity when it's required to digest food and then shut it down. It's not supposed to be running continuously, okay? Otherwise, you'd have so much acid. The moment you slept, you lie down to sleep, you'd actually have acid running down up your esophagus. That's not the case. When you'd actually drink water, it doesn't provide enough to basically shut that. You'd have that sort of problem. We don't, because basically when these things work properly, They activate them and they turn them off. And that's the advantage of animal foods. I wasn't aware until I looked at this study that this is actually what taurine can do, can play an important role in regulating this part of gastric secretion. I was quite surprised. I was not aware of this until I read this study, because I haven't seen it in any other study. This is the first mechanistic study which actually shows the difference between a control group and a group that's basically an animal that basically is, and they've got, devices inside to be able to pick this up and see these differences. Very interesting. Total during the experiment under exposure of taurine, volume of gastric juice increased 94.7%. That's a really good p-value. Anybody that knows p-values, 0.001, the likelihood that that is just accidental is unlikely. So anything of that sort, yeah, is a pretty good p-value relative to the control. So also the flow rate of free hydrochloric acid over the time observed increased 117.4%. Pepsin, 133%. And look at the values. These are highly significant statistical in regards to the control. So Devitt changes total taurine under the influence of taurine as in dynamics, and the amount of it for the experiment is not Devitt's CAS in stomach juices was less than control value during the experiment. And that's what we want. We want that stuff to be less. We want it to break down and all that. So I've already covered the sodium part. And we've covered that, the increase as well. That's in the overall. And that is the combination of hydrochloric and juices in general. I think that was about it. I don't think there was any other point that I did want to make. It's more of the intervention type things. I think that was about it, without basically adding too much confusion to people. So really the take-home message is that when you eat animal products, you get a better functioning stomach, you get a better regulated system, the way it absorbs nutrients and stuff like that. And that's really the important. And even if you've got a stomach that is damaged, when you eat species appropriate foods, they will protect a damaged stomach by adding more mucosa layer to protect those areas that have been damaged by things like H. pylori, that have caused this sort of damage. And over time that will heal, because when you're eating a species appropriate diet, and a diet which has got plenty of protein in it, and also fat soluble vitamins, which regulate the collagen degrading enzymes, you will basically heal that tissue much faster than other people. And we've seen taurine healing, the previous study that I looked at, about taurine healing dramatically, not only the skin, but actually more than double the internal organs. So any collagen, that's gut, stomach, all these sort of areas, you can actually see how it would have that effect, and it had in the other study. And this one just confirms the same sort of stuff. And that's the important take-home message. Animal foods that are rich in important amino acids, in important fatty acids, and many other components are the things that heal and improve the quality of function of different parts of our body. This is one on the stomach and digestive system. But beyond that, there are plenty of other research that shows a mechanistic or a strong inference in terms that the likelihood of being anything else is unlikely. I like this study because it's a really good mechanistic study, which shows improvements in digestion, improvements in stomach function as well, under the influence of taurine, which is basically a key amino component, sulfur amino component of animal foods. So the take-home message: eat sulfur-rich animal foods and you'll be better for it. I hope you enjoyed this. Anyway, see yous.